All right, welcome. Good morning and welcome to the live exchange. I'm Dr. Pamela, and today we are going to be talking about, it's really a relationship masterclass. What does it take to not only overcome past relationships, but how do we become our best selves for the next stage of our lives, whether or not that immediately means a new relationship, or if it's just about pursuing a new career, traveling the world. What is it? Today, we're going to be talking about that next great phase of your life, before, during, and after that relationship. And why relationships? And the reason is because it literally impacts every aspect of your life. So what happens in your relationship impacts what's happening and how you perform and your mindset on your job, the way that you parent, the way that you pursue your life, the way that you handle COVID. So there's so many factors that relationships impact that I thought it would be really important to revisit this conversation about relationships and healing and living your best life. And I have a great guest on the show today, Marcus Joyner III. He's actually joined us a few times in the past to talk about his own transition and out of a relationship, from divorce, and really just some of the steps and the measures that he took to enhance his own life. So I am looking forward to this conversation. I would love to hear your thoughts, your feedback, your strategies. We're going to be looking at healing from three particular standpoints, three keys. And that's refocusing, rebuilding, reloving. For those of you who have read my book, you're familiar with this. This is what we'll be talking about today. I'm very excited. So stay with us. We've got a great show ahead of you. Get on Facebook, comment, leave your thoughts, and we're going to have a great show. So stay with us. We'll be right back on the live exchange. Welcome back to the live exchange. I'm Dr. Pamela, and today we are talking about relationships. We're looking at how we use these experiences to grow and to become even better. Every experience is intended to aid in our growth and our development and the pursuit of our purpose. So are we allowing our relationships to do this for us? Or are we allowing them to further debilitate us? It's really important that we are intentional about the lessons that we can learn from our relationships. So I want to introduce you to today's guest, Marcus Joyner III. Marcus Joyner III attended Norfolk State University, and he is currently attending Cal State University, East Bay, in their hospitality program, which is great because, look, we all need a vacation. We all need experts in the hospitality industry. We all need a reprieve, especially now. Marcus Joyner III has also experienced divorce and went and really spent a year and a half in therapy to address any of the challenges that came from that divorce. And this is so important, and the reason why I appreciate him being willing to come on the show about this is because this is a stigma in the Black community, and particularly with Black men. And so I would love to see more of this. So without further ado, I would love to bring on Marcus Joyner III. Hello there.
Good morning. Good morning.
Good morning. How are you doing?
I'm good. How are you doing?
Yeah, welcome back. I'm good. It's good to have you back.
A lot different in the studio.
It is. It's a lot different. But we will be back in the studio. And good morning to Ty. I see Ty Peace is commenting, and he has said, "Good morning, King." So yes, good morning, Ty. Thank you for joining us. All right. So I just want to kick off this conversation. I know that we have talked about this before. You experienced divorce. You went through therapy. I'm curious to know, it's been a little bit, I think the first time you were on the show, it might have been a year ago, might have been a year and a half ago. It was probably more like a year and a half. It's been a while. The first time you were on the show.
The first, about 2 years.
2 years. Okay. Because in that show, you were talking about, your experience going through therapy then. here we are 2 years later. I would love to hear how that maybe has impacted your life 2 years later. Is it still working? How did that, what's your look on that 2 years later?
It's definitely still working. Like I said, it doesn't necessarily fix things. It allows you to understand where things are coming from. And when you can understand like the root of problems, or you understand what's happening, then you can deal with it better. So it's not a fixer. It's more of understanding, how you feel and why.
Yeah. And that's such a good point, that it is really more about awareness of self and awareness of why things are happening, or, and I do think that people go thinking, and look, I'll be honest, I went to therapy and I sat down, I said, look, I think it was March, maybe. And I said, look, my 40th birthday is in December. So by then I need to be fixed. I need to be good by then. And, and the funny thing is, she didn't attempt to correct me or anything. But what I quickly learned is that it's about doing the work. It's about being intentional. It's about being willing to have those hard conversations, being willing to be vulnerable. And so, yeah, it's not just this magic potion that you take. It's not that you're going to sit down with a therapist and they're going to write the prescription to solve all your problems. You have to do the work.
Right.
Yeah. So I'm curious to know what kind of, and you don't have to get too personal if it's not, within your realm of sharing, but I'm curious to know what kind of work did you experience having to do as a result of therapy?
You mean while I was going through it?
Both, because I know that it continues, after the fact. There are things that you want to maintain, after having gone through it.
Okay, so my maintaining is about staying in the space. The people I have around me, positive, kind of like the same mindset. Just because my circle is very tight, and so I'm very like part of the job. Like I'm going through the work, the initial work. It was hard, and I feel like I earned this piece. So it's my job to protect it. And so I kind of do the things I need to do to stay in this space, and it's not always easy.
No, it's not. And I just have to re-emphasize that point that you made. You did the work. You worked hard to earn this piece, and you have to do what it takes to protect it. Woo-hoo. Whew, that's good, because that's my life. That's where I'm at right now. I got to do everything I can to protect it. So we're going to continue this conversation. We're going to go into trending topics when we come back. But stay with us. Get involved in this discussion. We'll be right back on the Live Exchange. So the part of the show used to be, we focus on politics and talk social justice and just different issues. And, we haven't really, we've kind of moved away from that a little bit because the politics over the past 4 years has been, it's just been kind of not appealing to talk about. So, but I will go there today because we had the first Democratic presidential debate. Was it Tuesday or Wednesday? It was Tuesday. And, but from a relationship standpoint, what I thought was really interesting was that after as Biden and, the two wives came to the stage, there was a very different response. We saw, a warm embrace versus, the Trumps just kind of stood there awkwardly, very interesting dynamic there with the relationship. So I'm not sure if we're going to see the full clip or if we saw it, but if you get a chance, you'll definitely check it out. It's a really interesting dynamic there, but we've seen this before, right? We've seen this before. And the reason why I thought this was so interesting to highlight is because there are, to me, there are things that stand out. Everybody's relationship isn't necessarily public and for, when relationships shouldn't be for public display. But there are some things that are quite noticeable that, make you think, I wonder what's going on over there. So I don't know if you noticed that, Marcus. I know that you were also watching the debate, but the interaction between the spouses after, I just found quite interesting.
I actually did see it. I was kind of looking forward to see just to see that. So yeah, I absolutely saw exactly what you're talking about.
Yeah. I mean, there's been a number of situations in which the body language of Melania has been less than warm, towards her husband. And it's interesting because one of the first things that I talk about in my book, Letters to the Brokenhearted, is how we had this picture perfect household, everything, everybody thought, oh, this is such a great marriage. Everything is great. And so what strikes me is that I was able to fake it. And I don't know if that's a good thing or not. I'm curious to know, what people think about that, because faking it isn't good either, so it's interesting that in many cases, and a lot of times when I've seen these two together, Melania's not faking anything. She is clearly not happy. She is clearly just, she's not, doesn't have this warm, I guess, demeanor towards her husband. And I'm what's better, and I don't even know if we could place value on it, but what's better to go ahead. You're in the public spotlight. You're under the world spotlight. Do you fake it, or do you, show what's going on?
Well, one of my mottos, one of the things that I've learned is always be true to yourself.
Yes.
So whatever that means for you, if that means faking it, then go ahead and fake it. But I think you can only fake it so much, though. I think the people that really know you and the people that's really observing, they can see. They may not know what's going on, but they can say something is going on.
Yeah. And, and while I may not obviously know all the things that are going on in the background, I believe that there's some sort of cry for help that is happening. I mean, when you're in the public eye and the whole world is looking and you refuse to hold your husband's hand and you refuse to, I don't know. To me, there's a cry for help happening there. So, yeah. And as people are saying, Jamie is saying you can only fake for so long, and it doesn't serve you to do this, but I do understand when you're in certain situations, what are you going to do? Right. Behind the scenes, you've got to get the help you need. You got to do what you got to do. But I just thought that was a very interesting contrast in the way that the two couples approached each other.
It definitely was.
Yeah. But, we've seen this before, so it's not necessarily anything new. So one of the things that I am also interested in and really just try to focus on when we talk about these relationships and how they impact the rest of our lives, are the lessons that are learned. So I spend a lot of time in Letters to the Brokenhearted to talk about, the challenges, but then I spend a lot of time on the lessons. And as you know, heartbreak can take a toll on us. There was a statistic that was just put up that says that there's an actual condition that heartbreak can create in somebody. What would you just say to somebody, Marcus, who is experiencing heartbreak and they're kind of going down the wrong road being bitterness? I'm never going to do this again. I'm never going to talk to anybody else again. What's the first thing that you suggest to people in that situation?
I mean, I would say it's okay in that moment to feel that, because that's how you're feeling at the time. And I think it's okay. But then you have to come to a point where you want to do better. You want to change. Like, you have to go through the process of mourning that relationship. So you gotta let if you want to cry, but then there's going to be a point of when you gotta kind of get going. You kind of got to change it. Think about the good things came from that relationship, and you want to seek that better. You want to get that back, but not the bad things. So, and kind of figure out how to get there.
One of the things that my therapist told me was not to feel guilty in thinking back and thinking about what you miss about it and thinking about some of the things that were good about it, because that is part of your experience. And when we feel the guilt around reflecting and reminiscing, it actually makes us beat ourselves up even more and unnecessarily, when it's okay, according to what she told me, it's okay to just allow yourself to have those thoughts and acknowledge those thoughts. Don't let them take over, but acknowledge them. And it allows you to move on even more easily when you don't beat yourself up over having them. So that was eye-opening to me. So you mean to say that I can actually think about this past situation without wondering, do I have issues, because I still think about it, So, but we're going to go to a break. So stay with us, continue with your comments. Definitely want to continue to hear from you all, and we'll be right back. All right. Welcome back to the Live Exchange. I'm Dr. Pamela, and I'm joined by Marcus Joyner III, and we are talking about relationships. So relationship recovery and really making the most out of the relationship. So one of the things that I absolutely love that Marcus said earlier is this idea of protecting your peace. And it's so important. I think that is, especially through COVID, I think one of the things that people really need to take extra measures to do is to protect their peace. You said that your circles are tight. What are the kinds of things that you do to actively protect your peace when somebody tries to, and I guess what kinds of behaviors threaten your peace? What are the kinds of things that you block? You're like, nope, not here, not here.
Well, I guess I've learned my triggers. I learned what's going to get me, like, not in the best mood. So yeah. But one of the things is I learned to communicate. I learned to express what I'm feeling. So if me and the fellas are somewhere and we're hanging out and something happens, I think before I probably would have not said anything and probably held on to it and held on it for a couple of days. Now I voice it like right on the spot, and it may get discussed, it may not, but I got that out, and so it's not something that lingers, and they may fire back, and it may be agree to disagree, it may be apology, it may be like I'm overreacting, but it's kind of gotten out, it's settled, it's done, and we moved on.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. And, I find that some people can receive the feedback better than others, and it really is not your, I guess, responsibility to make sure that they can receive what you have to say. You just say what you have to say, and in a way that's true to who you are. And whether or not they receive it is up to them. And I know that part of my challenge has been in the past, how do I make sure I don't hurt their feelings, or how do I make sure they understand me? And really, that's not your responsibility. So I think that's really important. We're going to transition into the research. All right. So the science today is looking at the emotional pain that heartbreak can actually bring. So a lot of us underestimate the impact that heartbreak can have. And look, every time a relationship ends doesn't necessarily mean heartbreak follows. So that's important to understand too. Sometimes the relationship just needed to end. The heartbreak happened a long time ago. It's now time to just recover and rebuild and so forth. But in those cases in which heartbreak has happened, it's important that we understand that there are really three primary ways that we are affected. And so, number one, we can experience emotional pain that feels like physical pain. that that we struggle with in the same way that we would struggle when feeling physical pain. And that's one of the reasons why we've got to take it seriously when somebody is going through something. So I have been watching the Girlfriends series, and on Netflix, it's back. And it's so interesting the way that William handled heartbreak, and I'll just leave it at that. But it was as if he was experiencing physical pain. It was extremely actually, it was kind of hard for me to watch because it was so sad. And I'm laughing, but it's not, but it was sad. And then withdrawal symptoms, these powerful withdrawal symptoms from the loss of a loved one impact our ability to think, to focus, and to function in the broadest terms. And so when we think about somebody who is experiencing withdrawal from a drug, we give them a little bit of grace. We realize that there are some physical ramifications of that, and emotional and mental. And so the same is the case when we are having withdrawals from the person that we love. And then the last one is intrusive thoughts. And these are those thoughts that they just keep coming to mind. So this isn't like what I was talking about before, when you just have a thought about a past relationship or an experience that you had and you have fond memories of that. These are intrusive thoughts that just continue and continue and continue, and they don't stop, and they haunt your mind all the time. You can't stop thinking of the person. You pour a cup of coffee and you're thinking, gosh, that's, we used to do this together, and what happened and what can I do to fix this? And it's just kind of it takes over. So the three primary ways that we're affected by heartbreak is the emotional pain, the withdrawals, and the intrusive thoughts. So I would love to hear your thoughts on these three components, Marcus.
I would agree. As you was talking, I was thinking back. I definitely would agree. Probably losing some sleep. Definitely losing some sleep. You're probably replaying everything in your mind. You kind of reviewing the entire relationship. Wishing you would have did this. Maybe you should have done that. You may even get emotional and blame that person, blame yourself. I think you do go through all of that. And sometimes you can have some not good thoughts. It can be rough.
Yeah, and there's where the whole self-awareness thing comes in, because you can check yourself if you realize that you're doing that, and you might even be able to adopt some strategies to think differently. But yeah, all of those thoughts come to mind. It's really, and it's not abnormal, to have the negative thoughts. But it's what you do with them. Where are you going with this? That makes all the difference.
It does, definitely.
Yeah. One of the things that when I actually did some research on this whole thing, and there's this concept, and it's similar to intrusive thoughts. It's complicated grief, and what it is this idea that the intrusive thoughts continue so much that you are experiencing this concept called complicated grief, and it just there comes a point where family, friends, they're tired of your heartbreak. They're done. They're like, okay, get over it. I'm going to take you out. We're going to get you a new person, and and so forth. How do you suggest that somebody who's kind of like, they feel like they have like exhausted all of their friend resources, what can they do to encourage themselves and to kind of pull themselves out of this?
You mean as far as a person going through it, what can they do?
Yeah.
Hopefully so, okay, with me, and it kind of, last summer when my brother passed, it kind of took me to a different place. And there were some people that wanted to help, some people that wanted to fix me, but I gravitated towards those ones who didn't want to do anything, because it wasn't, no one could fix me. It was something, it's something I had to go through. So those that, hey, you just want to meet for drinks and we don't discuss anything, those are the ones that I gravitated towards. And I appreciate people trying to fix me, but it was kind of making me mad because you can't fix it.
Right.
So you kind of just, again, going back to knowing yourself. And I knew what wasn't going to work for me. And what wasn't going to work for is people sharing their stories, so their loved ones that they lost. People trying to fix me. Those are the two things that I knew was I could feel that was triggering me. So I kind of stayed away from those.
You know what's interesting is that the common thread in what you're saying is people trying to control the situation. So whether you are the person who experienced the devastation, the heartbreak, or the people around you are witnessing it, it seems that there is this inclination for human beings to try to control the situation and say, we're going to fix it. We're going to make this pain go away. Your pain is making me uncomfortable, so I need to do something about your pain so that I can be okay. I think that sometimes we need to just step back and just allow the thing to play out. And I think what a Thai piece just said, what he said earlier, he said time. He said it may sound cliche, but time is a healer. Allow time to pass. And I think also, to your point, the idea of just allow the person to experience as much normalcy as possible. Let's go out and have drinks. Let's just experience some level of normalcy, because when I get back home, things aren't normal again. So I need to feel some level of normal life rather than people trying to highlight it and exacerbate the problem. So
right, and it's tricky, and I will be admit, it's very tricky. It is stepping aside, but not stepping away. So it was kind of like I wanted to be left alone, but I didn't want you. It really is tricky. So give me my space, but don't leave.
Right.
If that makes any sense. So sometimes I would go out. Where I would find my safest places, I would go to a cigar lounge. I smoke cigars, and I would go, and nobody knew me. So I was by myself, but I wasn't alone.
Yeah.
And so no one is talking to me about, hey, how you doing? How you holding up? We weren't talking about that. It was actually being around total strangers and feeling like everything was okay. So I wasn't alone, but I wasn't by myself. If that makes any sense.
It makes absolute sense. Yes, absolutely. And if we look at the comment from Jamie below, it says it's important to embrace the negative because it's part of our truth just as much as healing. And so to some extent, we also have to acknowledge the negative part of the experience, in order to be able to address it, to acknowledge that this is a part of the whole experience that I'm having. So you can't completely push it back. But yeah, I hear you. It's where do I find my reprieve, in all of this?
One of the biggest things I got from my therapist, and it was hard to do, but he said, embrace everything you're feeling. Don't run from it.
Right.
So he's like, imagine it's a storm coming. Don't run. Stand in the rain. And I was kind of like, but I 100% agree, and I get it.
And that's such a great analogy, because what do you have to do to stand in the rain? You have to stand firm. You've got to. I love that. I love that. All right, so we're gonna go to another break. Stay with us, and we'll be right back. Welcome back to the Live Exchange. I'm Dr. Pamela, and I am joined by Marcus Joyner III, and we are talking relationships. So I love this comment here by Ty Peace, because the reason I hear this a lot. I think we underestimate the impact that relationships have on men, and that breakup has on men. And so he says, it's tougher on men than I think most realize. Do men know this about each other? Do men fake each other out? Because I know a lot of times women don't know that men are struggling with it, so strongly.
Ty is actually one of my best friends, so he knows, and I think And you know what? And I think I'm safe in saying is my divorce, going through what I went through with my divorce, got me and a couple other friends tighter. It brought us closer together because I was always the one that didn't share things, maybe to one person. And when I was going through that, I just opened up and shared more. And they were there for me. And I think with me being vulnerable and sharing it with them, then when they start going through some things, it felt safer. It felt a safe place to do it. And then we lean on each other a lot through a whole lot of things.
Well, so, it's interesting because, women, I'm a woman. I don't know if you noticed. and we are pretty open about these things and maybe sometimes too much. I would say yes, probably way too much, if that's possible. But we don't always know what's happening on the other side of the door. We don't always know what, how men are dealing with this. And sometimes even think, well, he doesn't even care. He's just completely cold-hearted about it. And that's the assumption that I hear is the general rule. Either that or it's the other extreme. He's stalking me. You know what I mean? And so those are the two extremes that women tend to see with regards to how men deal with heartbreak. And so part of why I like talking to you and other men about this is because we as women need to see the human element. We're not going to see everything that you go through behind closed doors. We're just not. We're not supposed to. But I think that too many women underestimate the human element of what men go through when they experience heartbreak. Jamie has a question. Do you guys talk about problems in your relationships? Because women, we probably do too much of that. But
okay, so there's a yes and no question. The yes and no answer. Yes, with my particular group, my core friends, but I would say overall no. You gotta understand what we were taught by our uncles, our fathers, and what they were taught is to kind of hold it closer to the vest, and be tough. A man doesn't do this, a man doesn't do that, a man doesn't cry. But what they're not telling us is what to do with those emotions that we still feel. If you have a broken heart, you have a broken heart. You can't, because I'm a man, I don't have a broken heart. But they're not telling you what do you do with that. So what happens is you never heal. You take that to the next relationship, or you find a drug or some type of vice to help you get through it.
Yeah, wow, that's good. I gotta get this acknowledged ties comment here. We're human. We have human emotions. Real men don't care what you think of showing emotions. If you hurt. Still men at the end of the day. Absolutely. And I think that too often we underestimate or just don't acknowledge it. We feel what we feel so much. We don't leave room to consider what the other party might be feeling as well. So yeah, I think that, and I guess because I've said a couple of times, we might overshare as women, we might tell too much, and so I guess it really isn't about how much you're sharing, because sometimes things need to be shared. You don't want to stay tight-lipped if you're in an abusive relationship. You want to talk about that. You want to tell that. But at the same time, I think it's probably more of a matter of trust, because you said you have this tight circle. You can't just, call up anybody and be like, man, I'm hurting. You can't, I mean.
Well, because the biggest fear is, and it's probably with women too, is something that you share in a moment, vulnerable, and then it comes back to be used against you. I've been in a relationship where I've shared some things and then it was used against me in an argument, and it was kind of like, so then that makes you not want to share anymore,
right?
So
yeah. I've heard that many times, that's the, when you're vulnerable, of course there's that fear that it's going to be used against you, but then when it really happens, it's debilitating. You're just like, I'm shutting down. I'm not doing this anymore. I'm not going there anymore. So it's important for us to to be safe, like this is within the relationship, to be safe to be able to share who we are and what we're feeling, what we're going through. But I also think it's important to have people who can serve as an outlet for you, a sounding board for you. We are, people talk about everything needs to be private. And I think that it depends. Like, I don't think there's one universal answer for every relationship. It depends. So we're going to go to break, but I want to acknowledge a comment from Kiana Howell. It's important to be mindful of who you are vulnerable with in your circles. So, pay attention to those things, because you can't be vulnerable with everybody, but you do need to have somebody you can be vulnerable with. So with that said, we're going to go to a break. We'll be right back. I'm Dr. Pamela, and I am joined by Marcus Joyner III, and we are talking about relationships. So I have to read this quote here from Jamie Moranci. When I was going to break, I was saying that often as women, we don't really think about men and what they're dealing with, or just the other person in the party, and the fact that this might be difficult for them as well, and just kind of underestimate how this transition might be impacting them. And she says, I'm guilty of this too. I've never considered my ex-husband grieving our relationship because I felt he was responsible for the breakup, and #victim mode. And it's interesting because we tend to think, well, you caused this thing, so you bear the consequences. Go ahead and suffer for this. I'm glad you're hurting too. And what that does is it really causes that transition to be even more difficult, because you're spending that energy kind of wishing harm on them, actually, and not really, I guess, being sensitive to the notion that they may be going through something too. When I wrote my book, the 3 sections of my book is refocus, rebuild, relove. And the first part of relove is relove the ex. My editor, the first editor I had for my book, called me on the phone. He said, look, I'm divorced and I can't get with this section of your book that says relove your ex. I have no interest in reloving my ex. What are you talking about? So, and what I meant by that was they're human beings. They are your fellow, brother and sister here on this earth. How can you come to a place where this person, the mention of their name does not cause emotions to rise up in a negative way, where you can have some level of empathy and compassion, even if from a distance, from their experience. So I would love to hear your thoughts on this, Marcus, from the standpoint of, just what has that meant for you, or just, other people that you've interacted with regards to reloving that ex?
Well, I guess first acknowledging that everything wasn't one person.
Yeah.
Okay. So when you take your ownership of what you contribute to it, and then I guess just focus on, just like with any loss, I think we tend to look at the bad, what the hurt caused or the separation caused, but hopefully there was some good moments. There were some good things that you can take away from that. You can take away some positive things and be like, what if I like these positive things in a relationship, and going forward, I would like to have similar positive. So it depends on what you choose to focus on, the negative part of the relationship or the positive part. And with me, after I got through the emotional part, you just focus on, the good parts.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, and that's one of the things that I have also talked about, was that, take the good and take it with you, create the expectation that future relationships will involve this element. Not saying they have to be like that person, but maybe you experience a relationship where for the first time communication was solid. You're like, whoa, this is like amazing communication. They have just elevated the expectation for anybody else you're ever with, that, no, we need to have solid communication, because I've experienced that. And that is now a requirement for any relationship that I'm in. On the other hand, one of the relationships I was in was they didn't do bacon. Like, look, I am a bacon eater. I like bacon. And so I had to sacrifice bacon from my life for those years. And so I left that in that relationship. Moving forward, I do my bacon. In fact, candy coated bacon. I mean, I go all out. I went all out when I got out of that relationship with my bacon. So what do you want to leave there? And then what do you want to take with you? So really being able to parse through and because it's all supposed to be a lesson and an experience in growth.
Right. Exactly. That's funny.
Yeah. I know. I was a free woman. I was like, I'm having my bacon. So the other thing is, I wanted to, again, acknowledge another post here. Ty is saying it's tough because as men, you're taught to be the man. And when you lose love, you feel like you have failed in being the man. And I will admit that when that happens, there is no holding back in some cases for women, making sure that you know that you have failed at being the man. And this is one of the reasons why I emphasize in my book, relove the ex, because when you spend that energy making sure he knows what he did to you, it takes away from your own process of healing, because that's not healing.
Well, you know what? You know what's the other side of that? When the man realized later on that he failed.
Yeah.
Realizing, wow, I totally dropped the ball. And then you can understand why somebody was not happy or upset, because you be like, wow, when you have that moment and you can really, like I said, you get away from your feelings and have a real look back, and you can take the things that you did wrong. And it's a humbling experience.
Yeah, and you know what? I think it takes patience and trust and belief that they will have their enlightenment. It's not your job to enlighten them about what they, all of the things that are, you don't want to cause the suffering and the torture and all of those things. Trust that time will allow those things to be revealed to that person. I think sometimes we spend way too much time and energy, especially with people who have kids together, and they want to make sure that they suffer and that they use the kid as a tool because I'm going to make you pay. That's not you don't have to do that. That's not your job. They actually learn from your integrity, from your ability to hold your head high, from you doing better in life. That is probably more telling than any kind of revenge ever could be. So we're going to go into the second hour, but this is getting good. So stay with us. All right. Welcome to the second hour of the Live Exchange. I'm Dr. Pamela, and I'm joined by Marcus Joyner III, and we are talking about relationships and really how to move on when it's time to move on. As Marcus had mentioned, sometimes we end up taking that pain into a new relationship, and there goes the cycle all over again. I think we have a few comments here. We have a question. Jamie asks, where does a man go after the realization that they've dropped the ball? Whoa, we all want to know that. How do they get past the guilt and live a productive life for themselves?
It takes time. It takes time. Because you can't unring a bell. So you can just kind of. One of the things that I do, and she's probably watching, is if there was something that we kind of bumped heads on, me and my ex, I will text her and be like, okay, and I'll explain the scenario to her, and she'll just start laughing. So I will kind of go that step further, and kind of, shoot a text and kind of, okay, explain to her what happened. It's just taking time. It's just taking time and being real with yourself and what you're going through. I mean, you can't change what happened. You really try to change going further in the future.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, and I think that's powerful, is the idea that you can't change what happened. It is really about what's next. Kiana is saying they should seek counsel from those that they know can walk with them in their healing journey, i.e. therapist, spiritual counsel, mentor, life coach. And absolutely, there are certain people that I recommend gravitating towards and pulling away from during this time. This is kind of a comical name, but I call them pooper scoopers, people that you want to stay away from, because they're the people who are more interested in hearing the drama of your life and in sort of relishing in the drama of your life than they are being, genuinely a source of support for you. Two sources of support that I identified are the people with the experience, so they're the voice of experience. They've been there, but you don't want to just talk to anybody who has the experience. It's the people who have been there, and they also have been through it, and they have gotten to a better place in their life. So they have really they've cycled through and they have experienced the healing. Might want to stay away from people who've experienced it, but then they spiral. I noticed that as I was entering my 40s, I came across more and more women who had experienced divorce and had become bitter. I don't ever want to trust another man again. I don't ever want to, get married again. I don't want to ever, fill in the blank. And that's a challenge. I was like, I don't want to be exposed to that mindset because I have other things that I'm trying to do with my life. So you've got to be really careful about who you're seeking counsel from.
Yes. Yeah. And going back to that question, therapy is definitely something that helped me, and I recommend it, especially to other males. And it wasn't easy. I don't want to sugarcoat it that it was easy. Yeah. Like you see on TV, you lay down on the couch and blah blah blah. No, it was the hardest thing I've done. And he didn't give me any answers. He led me to see these answers for myself. So yeah. It was like you realizing it on your own. He just kind of led me to where I needed. So it was definitely.
And then the beauty of that. Well, the beauty of that is that it teaches you how to resolve your own problems next time it comes up, because now you've got the skill set. They taught you how to think through something. And so hopefully those skills will continue to be put into use as you experience new situations. So yeah, I love that. We're going to go to a break. When we come back, we've got more conversation going. So stay with us. We'll be right back.
We made a promise to one another that we would never get lost in each other, and I broke that promise. And you let me. You have let me bend to your every need time and time again. Oh, we have kids? I have to step back from my job. You quit your job? I work overtime. You have a dream of buying your father's building. It becomes my dream too. You run for city councilman? I stand by your side. You win city councilman. Now what? I'm supposed to give up what I love to become a politician's wife? How many dinners am I supposed to go to, Randall? And how long? And what if city council isn't enough? What then?
That's not what I want.
No, I finally have something. I have something that I have been looking for longer than I knew, and I am not going to give that up. I am not going to bend.
All right, welcome back. Boy, is that that's a classic scenario, I think, that women talk about a lot, and I would love to hear from a man's standpoint, because I know women talk about a lot, just sacrificing and bending and adapting and their dreams to what it is that their husband's doing. And in fact, I'm working on a book right now in which I write about this. But I would love to get your take. I mean, I'm looking at his face the whole time she's talking. And I know you can't completely generalize, but what is a man thinking when he hears this?
I mean, from what it looked like for me, he was like, it seemed like he was hearing it for the first time. Or maybe he heard it, but he was finally hearing her. I think I definitely was guilty of that. Like, you know, I'm not gonna say we think it's nagging, but yeah, we think it's nagging. And, but then is maybe it's the words he's using, maybe it's emotional, but you hear that person that one time, and it could be her 10th time saying it, but it's the first time you're actually hearing it.
Wow. You know, it's interesting because I wonder, is there any level of betrayal that he feels when he feels like he's hearing this for the first time? Like, wait a minute, I thought you gave up your job because you wanted to. I thought you took time off. I thought you worked overtime because we were in this together. And yet she's doing all this with some level of resentment. Like, where do you balance that out? Because she's doing it because, yeah, I feel like I need to do this, but I hate that I have to do this. And he's doing this because, or he's saying she is all for me. She's got my back. I don't have to worry about this. I'm gonna run for city council.
I think it goes back to the communication. Like I've heard older people say it when I was younger about when you get married, communicate. I think they probably should go a step further, how much or how to communicate, because you hear that, but everybody doesn't know how to communicate or how much to communicate. I think now I kind of over
I think I do too. I think that there is what we also need to acknowledge, that there's a lot of baggage that comes with communication. We've been traumatized in communication in a lot of ways based on the way that communication went in our previous relationships, the ways in which maybe we were silenced in a workplace, silenced at home as children. When I think about the plight of being Black in the corporate world and some of the traumatizing lessons we learn about communication in the corporate world and the ways in which we might bring that back to our relationships, because when you're traumatized and your brain doesn't necessarily discriminate that, oh, I'm in a safe place now, until you start to become aware that you even have that trauma.
I mean, and that's why I love that James Baldwin interview that you talked about a while back.
Yes.
Because he kind of talks about it, and that was in the 70s. And then I think we also take that from relationships to relationships. So if you're in one relationship and you don't feel like you had a voice, so that next relationship, you're kind of like a tyrant. I'm saying everything and everything that comes to my mind, I'm saying.
Yeah. Either that or you go the other extreme and you're just completely silent. You just,
Right.
What are you thinking? How are you feeling? Are you okay? Yeah, I'm good. So yeah, I mean, it goes both ways. And gosh, if I had thought ahead of time, I would have had us play some of that James Baldwin interview. I mean, it was just that conversation between James Baldwin and Nikki Giovanni was so powerful, because I just saw two people who were able to just engage in tough dialogue in a respectful, affirming, and loving manner. And to me, that is a huge model of what we don't see so much of these days.
See, in more conversations like that, they're not necessarily between couples, but I think between men and women, like just because it's two sides of the coin.
Yeah.
And I know a lot of men that I know, they will express it around other men, but for some reason they don't express it to the women. It's two sides of the coin. Yeah.
I mean, I think that one of the things that we probably need to learn to do is create safe spaces for our men to speak, but for men also to create safe spaces for us, to speak, and not to interpret it automatically as nagging. That maybe within what this big dusty cloud of nagging, maybe there's some nuggets in there that can be pulled out, and perhaps there's something about delivery that needs to be acknowledged. And so I don't know. I feel like there's a whole course somewhere in this conversation that needs to be created. Jamie is saying sacrifice is not compromise. People confuse this in relationships. Sacrificing yourself will inevitably lead to resentment. It's not holding it. It's not you holding it down. One of the things that I have to point out is that, after I got divorced, I was sure that because in my mind, I didn't cause the divorce. And in my mind, I had what it took to facilitate a great relationship. I'm a woman of integrity. I'm a great mother. I'm, dedicated to my career. I love hard. I'm just, all of these, I felt like I got everything that it takes. Not to mention that when I had my daughter, I was thinking that wasn't my last child. So, I'm going to, have more kids. So over time, I'm thinking I'm developing myself. When I wrote Letters to the Brokenhearted, I'm getting myself ready for that next relationship. Well, here we are 10 years later, and I'm still not remarried. I'm still single. And there came a time when I realized, wait a minute, there's some work that I need to do in the world that I'm best doing as a single woman. Not because I can't, there's not a man on this earth who would be a great partner in the things that I'm doing, but because what I've learned about myself is that when I do have a man in my life, I do exactly what she said in that video. I sacrifice everything. I drop everything. I didn't write the whole time I was married. I'm just not productive because my devotion is completely to my husband. And so Paul in the Bible says it's better that you guys don't marry. And now I used to turn my nose at that. Now I get it. Because if you have a certain mission in life and you are the kind of person that will allow your marriage to pause that mission, then it might be better for you to just stay single. And so for me, I was angry the first, halfway through this 10-year period, like, okay, look, Lord, I've done all the work. I have written a book over how to overcome. I have helped people. Like, I should be the one getting married. But what I've realized is that had I gotten married before I realized what I do when I'm married, which is to pause my purpose, I would never have created the things that I've created or done the things that I've done in this time period, because I would have allowed marriage to distract me from that. At this phase of my life, I know better. So I needed those years. This 10-year period has been so enlightening and needed that I am like, whew. So I'm going to go on. We're going to come back and we're going to continue to talk about that. But so we'll be right back. I'm back to the live exchange. I'm Dr. Pamela, and I'm joined by Marcus Joyner III, and we are talking about relationships. And what I was saying before the break was that essentially, thank God I did not get married in this 10-year period since my divorce, because I would have had no clue whatsoever that it would be 10 years past and I'm still not married. And there was a time where I actually did get angry about it and was like, what's up? What's going on? Why, my window is closing. There's, what's happening? And I have really come to realize and have come to complete and total peace with the understanding that I had work to do. And we always think when you have work to do, it's just work on yourself. I had work to do in the world. I had things that I needed to create that I likely never would have created definitely not with the men that I've met before, because as I displayed in those relationships, I was completely devoted to them and their well-being and bringing them up and building them. And I used that purpose I have to build other people to focus solely on the husband or the boyfriend or, and not use that in other ways. So Ty says it is a balance. Relationships are truly work and become the main focus over goals in real life. It's tough at times, but you can learn that balance. Watch out. So what are your thoughts?
Yeah, he's right. Balance is the key. And that's actually something that I'm aware that I struggle with, and it's something that I'm working on, that balance. Ty, his wife actually worked together, a couple of business ventures that they did do together, and it's not easy, but they do it together, and it is a balance. So trying to do, certain things that you want to do, and also have a love life, it needs to be a balance. And so I'm working on some balance.
Absolutely. And I love what Kiana said, that she said she can relate to that perspective. Relationships can be a distraction when you're not clear of your purpose path and how to preserve it. And it's interesting because I thought I knew. I thought it was clear. I was working in my career, I was writing, I was doing things, but I had no idea what my capacity was or what my capability was until I did it, until I stepped into it. And it's so much higher and greater and deeper and wider than I ever would have realized had I not dove in head first. So last year, and we're going to talk about the next week, we're talking about building wealth and finances and all of that. But I'll just quickly say that last year I bought a house, and in the home buying process, I learned it was a difficult home buying process. And it's not the first time I've bought a house by myself, which made it even more frustrating because this is the third time I've bought a house by myself. But in this case, I had to fight in ways that I've never had to fight before. I had to fight in ways where I would probably say, babe, can you just call them and deal with it for me? Or can you, I would not have had to be at the forefront of this fight, nor would I have had to done this by myself. The ways in which I had to stand up for myself, had to say no, had to not take no for an answer. I learned things about myself that I didn't even know was in me. And so at some point, I came to realize it's not about marriage being the goal. It's not about, at the end of the day, if I ended up getting married, I succeeded in life. And that is what we are told, at least women are told, that the goal is marriage. You're not dating just to date. You're dating to get married. And because I had that mindset, that caused me to be in a place of anger, like, well, why isn't any of this working? And so I know I'm talking. I want to hear your perspective, Marcus. But it was just so enlightening to me to realize that marriage is not the be all end all. Your purpose is, and when you're walking and living in that purpose, when marriage comes, when that relationship comes, then you're already understanding who you are, and you bring that person to the marriage. So we have to go to another break. But it's just that I just think it's so important for us to understand that we've got to get our stuff in order. And yes, this can happen in the context of a relationship, but it's so important to realize that balance, as Ty said, and to not lose yourself in the process. Stay with us. We'll be right back. Science for the second hour is a concept that I have talked about quite a bit on the show, and it's post-traumatic growth. And this is the idea that we grow after experiencing traumatic situations. And yes, relationships count as potentially traumatic situations. Breakups count as potentially traumatic situations. So just by definition, and this is research that comes out of the University of North Carolina, led by researchers Calhoun and Tedeschi. They coined the term, and they do a lot of research on it. And so a lot of my work is actually grounded in this idea of post-traumatic growth. I've got this little hair issue on here. But post-traumatic growth is positive psychological change that some individuals experience after a life crisis or traumatic event. So again, the key word here is positive psychological change. Post-traumatic growth doesn't mean that you don't experience deep stress, but rather that adversity can unintentionally yield changes in understanding oneself, understanding others, and understanding the world. And so this is, again, as I was saying at the beginning of the show, it's so important for us to take these lessons, tweak our lives, and move forward as a result of the lessons that we've learned. And so the idea is that after every relationship, there are lessons, and we can grow from those situations. One of the things that I had mentioned earlier is that, as I was approaching my 40s, I met more and more women who were bitter. They were like, I never want marriage again. And I just want to make the distinction here that in my statement that marriage is not the be all end all, it's not, it doesn't come from a place of bitterness. It really comes from a place of enlightenment, and the idea that as we allow our lives to unfold, we're not forcing things. We're not demanding that the next step is that I get married, but that we're allowing our lives to unfold naturally. So, Marcus, bringing you back into this conversation, I would love to know, because one of the things that I guess has gotten to me the most is that men who are relationship experts put a lot of pressure on women to do all the right things to get a husband. You've got to do, and I don't know if you've noticed that because they're talking to us usually. So I don't know if you've noticed the dialogue of these relationship experts that say, woman, if you do this, you'll get your husband. I'm curious to know what your thoughts are about that in terms of, if you, implement the 90-day rule, you get a husband. If you, there's just all these rules. What are your thoughts about these rules that we have to follow?
I mean, I don't think, I guess it's good to have some type of rules, but I think it's BS. I mean, I think when you meet somebody that you vibe with, y'all click with, y'all have things in common, there's real good dialogue, then those rules don't really hold true. Especially the whole, I know when you're younger, when you meet somebody, you call them, don't call them the next day.
Yes.
But why? I mean, who came up with that? If you want to call that person, call that person. Just go back to being your truth. And if that person is for you, I think it will all work out in the wash, so to speak.
Yeah. There's, I think, probably too much intention, if this is the right way to say it, too much energy being put into that final goal, which people, say, I gotta get that ring. I gotta get that ring. Jamie says marriage is not the be all end all. Oh, she's quoting me. Your purpose is. Now, when we get this, then it makes sense that the person we marry is compatible with our purpose. And then we're in alignment, with the person that we're with. They're not hopefully feeling intimidated by the work that we're doing because they already knew the work we were doing when we came into this situation. One of the things that I read as I was rereading, so the book that I'm writing is called Joyfully Single. And it's the idea that it's okay. You can do this in joy. You don't have to feel like something's missing from your life because you're single. And one of the things I said is that, have we ever found a scripture in the Bible that says a woman who finds a husband finds a good thing? And I don't say that to male bash. It is a good thing if it's a good situation. But I say that to say that I don't think that all of our energy and everything that we do needs to be spent on that ultimate goal, that final destination. Because I think that we will attract what is supposed to come to us if we just focus on being who we are.
Well, I think there's two. Okay, so for that particular thing, there's two things. So I think some people are so focused on getting married that you don't enjoy the journey of getting to that point.
Yeah.
And then when you get married, then what? What's after that? If that was your goal for so many years, and then you get your goal, then what?
Yeah. And so sadly, I see that is the goal, and then what is? It becomes a very real reality that hits when then what arrives. I recall, and I have these relationship discussion events, and it's been quite a while since I've had one, Women, Wine, and Wisdom, and I had a couple show up, and they were so focused on how they did this grand proposal, and it was such a showboating display of coupleship that to me, everything was apparent. There was some issues with the guy. I was like, there's something wrong with it. He's not all right. And, and then it came across very strongly that the woman was like, I got my husband, but there was no depth. It was just this surface level, showy. They looked like this quote unquote power couple, but they weren't. And it was abundantly obvious, at least to me. And it just like, I wanted to grab them both and say, look, let's sit down, because it just, I don't know if you've seen this. I feel like we've all seen this, where the relationship is more about what we display to the world than it is about who we are to each other, what we're here to become together.
There was maybe a little bit. There's probably a little small, not on that big scale. I think I was guilty of that. I used to be the the Facebook tag in here, we here there, we here there, we here there, and and looking, going through what I went through, and I realized that I was more into telling people that I was happy than actually being as happy as I was displaying.
Yeah.
So yeah, that was a realization for me. So now I don't do that.
Yeah, and I say don't do that. I agree. Don't do that if you're not truly happy. I mean, right. I don't necessarily have an issue with people checking in and we're in Hawaii and share your life. That's what Facebook is about. But I just think that we shouldn't lose sight of authenticity and truth. And so I can tell, I really can. I think I need to make some money doing this. But I can tell when I see a couple that is not going to make it versus a couple where I can see this is the genuinely, truly happy couple. And I am never wrong. Every single time, it's without question, the other person disappears from their page and it was as if it never happened. And not that, things happen, relationships evolve, they come and they go. But sometimes it's just so abundantly obvious. And I don't know how they don't see it. I think people think they can just kind of fake their way through a situation and it's going to fix themselves. And the reason why I know that is because that's what I did. I thought if I fake my way through this relationship over time, it'll heal. It'll be fine. We'll figure it out. But you don't just figure it out. It actually takes work.
It does. It takes work. I mean, a lot of things we already said: communication, knowing your true self, past things. All of that goes into the pot to even really have a shot for a successful relationship. And then you still have to do the work. You still have to do it once you're in the marriage, once you're in the relationship. It's almost a guy explained it to me. I'm a big sports person, so I use all these analogies. It's kind of like boxing. When you don't have the belt, you're training, you're doing all these things, fighting everybody, and then when you get the championship, a lot of people stop because you are the champion. So you stop doing everything that got you there, and then that's when you lose.
Well, so I got to use the fight analogy for the fight that just happened this weekend. Woo! and there was a whole lot of showboating going on. And I'm sorry, I can't think of their names. I know it was Nigeria, and where's the other guy from? I can't think of it. But the short guy from Nigeria, his strategy was in the mind. It was precision. It was he had a game plan. It was like, I'm going to follow my strategy. The other guy was about showboating. I'm big and I'm strong and I'm going to just beat him down. And that's not what wins. What wins is strategy. And so the same thing I think is the case for relationships. What wins is strategy. What wins is stamina. And it's not, we're having another fight, I'm tired. No. If we're planning on being in this for the long haul, we've got to have the stamina to keep going. We've got to have a strategy to keep this relationship intact. And so it just like we would do with exercise, just like we would do with trying to get a promotion at the job. You've got to have a strategy. You've got to be consistent. You've got to have that stamina. So we're going to a break. I know you're going to have to leave us shortly. So when we come back, I just want to get some final words of wisdom from you. So think about that while we're on break. We'll be right back. Live Exchange, I'm Dr. Pamela, and I am joined by Marcus Joyner III. And I mentioned Nigeria, and I have to acknowledge that today is Nigerian Independence Day. Yes, it is. So that victory was perfect timing. Marcus and I have been talking about relationships, and just want to have some words of wisdom that you might want to leave our audience with as you leave us. And I don't know, we don't see your eyes. You might want to, there you go. We want to see your whole face. So what would you leave us with, Marcus?
Wow, that's a lot. I would just encourage, any men that we've all gone through traumas, everything from our childhood, and to just carry over. It's okay. It's okay to. I mean, you would go to a doctor if you're sick. You would, if you were in financial trouble, you would seek somebody that could help you out that way. And our mental health. There are more athletes starting to come out now to speak about it. So maybe that will, going forward, it will help change that narrative. But it's perfectly okay to go and do the work. Reach out to somebody. Do your research, and just heal. It definitely changed me. It changed how I view life. It changed my relationships. Definitely the best thing I've ever done.
Yes. I love it. And I look forward to you finishing up this degree in hospitality, because I can see you creating something really awesome with with your, just kind of your life experience. And it's amazing how we take our life experiences and we can build things with it. So I'm really looking forward to that. So, keep your eyes, no pressure, Marcus. Everybody keep your eyes on Marcus.
We're definitely working on a couple of things. COVID kind of slowed some things down, but we're definitely working on some things. So
I love it. All right. Yes. So stay tuned. And thank you so much for joining us, Marcus. I think we can go ahead and let you drop off. I know you've got another commitment, but thank you again so much for joining us. And thank you to those who have, who your people have been commenting. I think it's wonderful.
Thank you.
Yes. Thank you. All right. So we're going to continue just the next 15 minutes. And I really want to acknowledge some of your comments and some of the things that you all have said along the way. And one of the things that I just going back to the conversation that we were having about, being by ourselves and what, really the value of that. And one of the comments that Jamie put up was that creative energy is best cultivated in her quiet space where she only focuses on herself. And that is so important because our quiet space can be a physical space, or it can be a time period, meaning that in this phase and in this season of my life, this is my quiet space. And I think that too often we fight that. We try to buck against it because there are other things that we want to do. There's other things that we see, people doing, or that we want to have for ourselves, and we want it now. And I know, because I'm guilty. I definitely tried to fight that quiet creative season of my life because I had plans. I had things that I needed to have done. And so, but I am so glad that I just allowed life to unfold the way that it's unfolding, because I see the benefits. I see, and that's just, to put it lightly, I see the benefits. So moving on, Ty says that I see young couples all the time. I don't plan for I'm sorry. I tell young couples that all the time. Don't plan for the wedding day, plan for the days after. And it sounds cliche, right? It sounds like, oh yeah, of course, we know that there's something after the wedding day, but no, this is actually, it's real. You actually truly want to do the work. It's like getting the degree. I'm finishing school, I'm graduating, and I'm going to try to get this job, but I don't know anything about this industry really. I'm just going to jump in there and see what happens because I skated through my degree. I didn't take it seriously. I didn't learn anything. I didn't take my time on it. I don't know nothing about this, but I'm going to get the job. And how sustainable is that? And so the same thing goes for relationships. Take it seriously. Don't skate through the dating period. The dating period, in fact, should be fun. It should be educational. It should be enlightening, empowering, enriching. If you're not experiencing that in the dating period, then there's not a whole lot of substance to go into a marriage. If the only thing you're talking about when you're dating is marriage, in terms of what your marriage will look like and so forth, if that's the only thing you're talking about, that's not enough. It's not enough. You've got to talk about who each of you are. You've got to learn about each other's communication styles. You've got to be willing to dig deep and learn about childhoods. And, I know a couple that says that they do not talk about past relationships, that they are literally blind to each other's past relationships. No talk about exes, period. And that's not healthy. In my mind, that's not healthy. And I don't know what you all think about that. I would love to hear your comments about that. If you have parameters around conversations about exes, can that bring up emotions? Absolutely. But if the two of you can't handle emotional conversations in your relationship, what does this mean for your marriage? So this is the place where you should be practicing these things with each other. And that's another thing that I talk about in Letters to the Brokenhearted, is that practice while dating. Even if you aren't in a committed relationship, practice having conversations that you're not comfortable with. Practice speaking your expectations and who you are, and just being authentic. Practice that, so that when you do get into a serious relationship, it's not something that you have to think twice about. It's something that comes more naturally. When you do get in your serious relationship, the two of you together should be practicing different dynamics in communication, should be practicing scenarios. Everything shouldn't happen for the very first time when you get married. That's what I'm just saying. Everything shouldn't happen for the very first time when you get married. So look at another comment. Dietrich says, take time for yourself to heal. Many rush into the next relationship and then find themselves in the exact same situation. Yes. And we see that, so often. And I know people who have done this. They've just kind of cycled through the same relationship over and over again, different person, same scenario, and blame the other person, and blame the world and say, everybody does this to me. Everybody treats me badly. Everybody abuses me. If that is the common thread in your life, it's therapy is you've got to get some therapy. You've got to get some coaching. It's essential that you figure out what that common trigger is in your life that creates the same results all the time. Not victim blaming, it's victim empowering. If you're constantly experiencing the same thing over and over again, then you've got to find your power in the situation. When we come back, we're going to talk more about what that looks like to find your power in the situation. And then I see a couple of comments here, so we'll definitely cover those when we come back. So stay with us. We're almost done. We'll be right back. All right, welcome back to the Live Exchange. I'm Dr. Pamela, and today we've been talking relationships. I was joined by Marcus Joyner III earlier, and great conversation. And I've just got to acknowledge some of these comments that we've got here. Kiana says people fear learning or sharing information that can fuel comparison or insecurities. However, if you focus on the lessons learned without demonizing your ex, those are the discussions to engage about the past. And this was with regards to that idea that can you talk about exes in your current relationship? My goodness, I believe we should be able to talk about just about anything in your current relationship. If they are supposed to be this huge piece of your world, by all means, the communication should be open. So I agree, Kiana, there's a lot of fear that fuels that, and insecurity that exists within us. And so if we have these kinds of restrictions or these kinds of blocks, we might want to find out what the root of that is, because we really should be able to have conversations, even if it's about exes. Now, these conversations can also be revealing. If these conversations lead to kind of showing that there's still some unresolved emotions and unresolved issues with regards to the ex, we can't be afraid of that either. If we're going to have these conversations, we also need to be willing to tackle the baggage that may show up as a result of these, conversations that we might not realize was there. Ty says, we have to be comfortable in our skin. There were relationships that existed before you, and as long as the past stays the past, let's talk. So sometimes we are able to talk about the past because it gives us insight into who the person is today. And the more that you block that out, the more that you block the ability to learn more about the person that you're with. So there's so many benefits to having that open line of communication. And communication it's huge. It's not everything, because with communication comes the ability to take in what the person is saying to you, without allowing your stuff to get in the way, without allowing your insecurities, your biases, your triggers, really have put a halt on progress. And so I know that we always say communication is key, and it is, but communication doesn't come alone. You've got to actually be a master communicator, which, it doesn't come overnight. It takes practice. I can't emphasize practice enough. It takes practice. So practice. So whether you are married or dating or single, take opportunities to practice communication. If you're married, have practice conversations with your spouse. Set rules. Say, you know what? We're going to test this. We're going to have a conversation about X, and we're going to practice what it means to listen to one another and to manage our emotions as we go through this process. Doesn't mean emotions don't exist, but it means that we are going to learn how to manage our emotions in a way that's not going to damage the other person, in a way that's not going to damage ourselves or our relationship. There's a need for us to really master this thing called communication, because I think it's one of the biggest things that's hurting our relationships these days. And to not only master the communication itself, but to master yourself, to learn your stuff, to be a student of you. Who are you? And what are your issues? What's your stuff? What's your baggage? And how are those things creating blocks on communication? And how are those things creating blocks on your relationships? So am I married? No, I'm not married. Was I married? Yes, I was. And I've learned so much in both realms, being married and being single. And I'll say that the last 10 years of my life have been absolutely amazing and productive, and I wouldn't trade it for the world. So embrace where you are, embrace those lessons, because those are the lessons that are going to take you to the next level in your life. I want to thank you for tuning into the live exchange where we exchange compelling dialogue every week. And together, we can right the wrongs, we can speak the truth, we can rise above, and we can stand for change. Thank you for tuning in, and join us next week as we talk about wealth. Have an awesome week.